How is it March? Hello, I'm Chanel, and my pronouns are they, them, and theirs. I'm a PhD student in human-computer interaction, and I am also knitting, spinning, weaving, and designing in Boulder, Colorado. So on social media, you can find me pretty much everywhere as Piper Nell, Pipernell, mostly on Instagram as that Ravelry. That's also my username. My Ravelry designs are under my legal name, Chanel Wu, Shanel, space WU. And I also have a Facebook page that's mostly just reposts of Instagram if you're more of a Facebook person. So this is episode 41, and like, it's already March, and it's only my first episode of the year. I'm just like, I didn't get around to it until now. It's been kind of hectic, as always, and I feel like I just have not had such a great handle on my own schedule. So, an overview of what I have for you. I have some news, just getting some announcements and administrati out of the way. A bit of what I've been knitting and crocheting on. Some of my weaving, which mostly gets into my work and research. But this time it's not very technical. It was very light on the kind of intense weaving and me just trying stuff out. And then I have some on my radar, things I'm reading or thinking about or watching, or listening, all the media, and just, you know, some rambly life updates. Now let's get right into that. So news. The Druid Crown was published a while ago. That was the first, my first pattern of the year, and hopefully I'll get the next one out soon. I'm also doing a series of videos called Unfabricate, since I've been so irregular with my podcast episodes, that I am doing a project where I thrifted a bunch of sweaters and, well, not all of them are sweaters, garments, knitted garments from the thrift store. I do have some wovens, but I won't be using them for the same purpose, but I am reclaiming yarn from thrifted knitted goods. So I'm just kind of recording my thoughts and findings on each one, kind of going with a biology metaphor there with each one's, like, I see it as like a specimen that I'm dissecting, so I'm having fun with that. And yeah, you should totally check this out. If you're taking apart stuff too, I would love to learn along with you. If you want to like share your thoughts, share your projects with me, I would love to hear about that. So that's Unfabricate. And then the last bit of news, I am going to be running a test knit for a shawl design coming up soon. Let me go grab it. I finished this sample a while ago, just woven the ends, but this, I'm finally getting around to writing the pattern for this. This is a all garter stitch and short row shawl. Just really, my intent was to make this a shawl that you did not have to pay much attention to. If you had any two skeins to use up, that whether you wanted a bold contrast like this, or a subtle contrast, or even stripe it, or just do, or you wanted to play with the colors, this was supposed to be that sort of mindless project that you didn't have to even pay attention to the stitch counts for. You do short rows to shape these triangle wedges. But yeah, the colors, because they remind me of the pansexual flag with the pink, the yellow, and the blue. This is a colorway by Marionated Yarns. My working name for it so far is Play It by Queer, because of that and the kind of just wing it, improvise it ethos that I'm going with in this pattern. So yeah, hopefully I'll get the first draft up and ready, speaking it into existence, hold me accountable, and I'll be hosting the test knit soon. I do have a new way. I'm trying to be more organized in my test knits, so if you're interested in signing up as a test knitter, you can actually find a form on my Instagram, which I will also link in the down bar in this video, where you can sign up for any future test knits or current test knits, and that I'm running on Slack. Check that out if you're interested. That's all for news. That was, oh my god, I hope I'm okay. Oh sheesh. Okay, calm down. Alright, so on to knitting, and actually a little bit of crochet this time. So, haven't been knitting a lot or crocheting a lot. Just, I don't know what I've been doing. I've been doing a lot of reading this semester. But one project I've been working on is and it's almost done now, is the 1898 hat, which is by Christine Burns. It's a free pattern on Ravelry, so now I can geek out all about everything. I can't believe I haven't made this pattern before. So here it is. It's a nice cobalt blue. It is too big for my head because I am making it for someone else as a late Christmas present. Technically, it's not late because I let her know that she was... My gift to her for Christmas was offering to make her something. And I told her that before Christmas. So she got that gift on time. And then she then decided what I would make for her. So it's not late. And now her birthday's coming up. So, combination gift. Anyway, so I can't believe I haven't made this hat pattern before. You've probably seen it everywhere. It's a very clever hat pattern with a doubled garter stitch headband is that? Brim that's knit sideways and then grafted, and then you pick up stitches and knit a normal beanie. So I'm a little worried that I knit because of the construction, I'm a little worried that I misjudged the height of the actual body of the hat. It's a little too tall, but maybe my friend will like it that way. If not, I haven't woven in the ends yet. I can just rip it out and reknit it with a little bit and start the decreases more quickly. So the yarn that I used, she requested a cobalt blue because that's her favorite color. And I actually used a few different yarns here. The main yarn I got at my local yarn store, because this is all fingering weight held triple. The original pattern was written for a worsted weight or on the heavier side, so an Aran weight. I've seen some people even use bulky yarns. But when I went to the yarn store, the nice hand-dyed yarns that would come in this, like, super bright cobalt blue were fingering weight, because that's just what was available to me when I went shopping. So I took that, I bought a skein of that, and then I had some they weren't as bright, but they were close blues in my stash, just solids of sock yarn. And so I took that skein that I bought, I held that double, and then brought in the third strand of the sock yarn that I had from my stash. The main yarn that I used is Hummingbird Moon in their Over the Moon sock base. This is an 80/20 merino superwash nylon. It's a very nice indie dyed sock base. And their colorway is called Curiouser and Curiouser, which is cute. So the other yarns that I brought in are Cascade Heritage. And then when I ran out of that, I brought in some Manos Alegria that I had. And I believe that's the blueberry colorway. Or is it Oceano? One of their bright blues. So it's kind of a hodgepodge of yarns in here, but it turned out pretty well. You can see at the top of the crown, that's when I brought in the different yarn. It looks a little bit different, but overall, I am really happy with this fabric. It's super, super dense. It's going to be super warm because that was her request. That I have made a hat for her before, but it was with a wool acrylic blend, so it's good for kind of transitional weather and when it's not super, super cold outside. But she likes to go skiing, so if she's on the mountain and the winds are whipping past her face and head, then this hat will keep her super warm. So because I was substituting the yarn for, and possibly getting a different gauge, I really swatched intensely and ended up using a US 4 or 3.5 millimeter needle for this hat to get gauge. The gauge was 5 stitches per inch. So it was a really tight gauge on pretty small needles. Sometimes my hands would hurt as I was knitting because it was such a tight gauge. So I had to hold the yarn under a lot of tension. So as I mentioned, the gauge I got gauge according to the pattern with my adjusted needle size and the substituted yarn. But I found that and the gauge was given for both garter and stockinette. So I got gauge, but the hat was still, as I was knitting it, the hat was still turning out small, because it turns out even though my gauge measured the same, the nature of the fabric was less stretchy than what the pattern called for, apparently. The gauge was given for an unstretched fabric, and I guess I didn't test the stretch or something. Probably just, it's a different fabric with tripled yarn, and it just behaved differently. So I had to do some modification. So when I was knitting the headband in the flat parts, well, the front and the back portions, I added extra rows of garter stitch to make the headband longer, but also, well, my friend already has a bigger head. I knew I was going to be adding some size, and I had to add even more because my fabric was turning out less elastic than the sample's size. I didn't have to do any math for it, really. Because of that construction, I just had to, you start somewhere between the ear flaps, you knit one of the ear flaps, and then as you move across the head, before you get to the other ear flaps, I just kind of checked it with her head and was able to add as many rows as I needed to get the other ear flap in the right place. And then I just had to knit the other side until the ear flaps were symmetrical. And that ended up being about 8 rows, 8 garter ridges on either side. So 16 additional rows in the headband on each side for a total of 32 added rows. That was more than I thought was necessary, but it worked. So yeah, just adventures in adjusting this hat. The pattern is only written for one size, but I know a lot of people have adjusted it. So if you need help adjusting it, I would definitely check Ravelry. I should have referenced Ravelry before I started knitting the pattern, but I've been recording my notes. I feel like it might be useful for me to write up some sort of like math, more like math and formula-like notes for adjusting the 1898 hat. But anyway, fits great. And because I was putting so much work into this hat, I don't know, this is some sort of logical fallacy, right? Like, you put in so much work, you just got to make it perfect. And it was for a really good friend. So I really tried to figure out the perfect graft for the headband when I was putting it together. So here is the grafted side. You can see because the tail's coming out there. And here's the other side. You really can't see that I grafted it there. And I am really happy that I figured it out. I like sketched, basically the way I did it was I really visually examined the structure of the rest of the fabric of the headband. I drew it out in a diagram to understand the structure. And then I drew the pathway for the grafting yarn to follow to replicate that structure. So I am really happy with that. I had to figure out something because this headband is actually knit doubled and then you fold it over when you pick up for the rest of the hat. These are slip stitches, so it changes slightly from grafting garter to grafting stockinette. I'm not sure if I quite figured that out, but I'll have to redraw the diagram and hopefully I'll be posting something about that. So yeah, I'm really happy with this. I'm going to try this on her later today and hopefully it fits her. If not, then I can always adjust it. And then I think she will really like it. So that's the 1898 hat. Wow, I talked a lot about that. The other project I've been working on, like I said, haven't really been working on much, but I'm doing some crochet for once. So I am crocheting something that was on my 2018 Make 9 that I'm just now getting to in 2019, but that's okay. So I'll show you, right now it's in 2 parts, so it might be a little difficult to show, but I'm crocheting a top. This is the Portal top by Mermaid Cat Designs. She designs a lot of super, super cute crochet tops, crop tops, bras. And this is one of her actual like top-like patterns. A lot of them are just like too cropped or bralette-like for me to wear as an outer layer. So I chose this one, which is a loosely fitting cold shoulder top, which I think will be super cute. I'm really happy with this yellow. I hope I look good in it. I haven't really worn a lot of yellow, but this color makes me really happy, and it suits this kind of diamond motif that's going to be on the front and the back, which is kind of like a geometric sun to me. So yeah, the yarn is Knit Picks Lindy Chain in Honey, which is a fingering weight linen cotton blend, and it's actually a chainette construction, so it's really airy. This is the other piece. Basically, you have to put the front on one piece on pause and start the other, and then work them simultaneously. It's a paid pattern, so I'm not going to, I might have to cut out some of the details that I geek out about. I'm using a 3.5mm hook, which is the size recommended in the pattern. I did swatch. I got the gauge that the pattern required, but I think there's something about like, yeah, this yarn doesn't behave like the yarn that she used for her sample and that she called for, which I believe was the Knit Picks fingering, Knit Picks Comfy fingering, which is a different fiber blend, probably a different hand. And this linen yarns behave really differently. So I think there was something about, I haven't crocheted a garment that I had to swatch for before. And I haven't crocheted with a lot of linen before. So I was really just trusting in the pattern to see if my yarn substitution would work. I think the thing was, I should have blocked. I'm going to block these pieces. I'm going to block the finished garment, but I need to, in my swatch, I didn't actually get gauge. It looked like I got gauge. It looked like I got stitch gauge in one direction and then row gauge in the other direction when I was measuring it, but I didn't really get both at the same time because I was stretching the swatch as I went and I didn't block it. So, gauge rage. Ugh. Okay, anyway. So to make up for that, I noticed that the first piece I was making was turning out too narrow. I did choose the size small, and I knew like the measurements that she gave were the correct size for me, but because of my gauge issues, when I started the second piece, I added more stitches on the sides so that it will be the right circumference when I seam up the 2 pieces. Hopefully that turns out okay. We'll see. But that's all I've really had time to knit and crochet on. Sometimes I've been putting in a few rows on my sock yarn, on my sock scrap blanket. But yeah, I feel so scattered, but I'll vent more about that later. So that moves me on to weaving. So as I mentioned before, weaving is more on the side of my like work and researchy stuff. And this is also my chance to kind of explain some of the more like techie, electronic-y stuff that I do, because I haven't been doing any big weaves. We've been setting up, we've been rewarping our big jacquard loom, and that's been a huge process. It's done now, but that was pretty recent. So in the meantime, while I was working on getting the loom rewarped with my lab mates, I was sampling on actually a pin loom. We have a lot of Shocked stuff because they're local, and so their Zoom loom is their pin loom model. And these are the kind of squares that you can make. they're really cute and fun, and I was actually able to bring the pin loom to my classes. I can definitely, well, I mean, I've communicated to my professors that crafting helps me focus in class, and it's not me being distracted, because come on, people look at their phones during class, and they're way more distracted, and it can be way more distracting. But okay, maybe my weaving can be a little distracting because people are like, oh, that's so cool. But anyway, it helps me focus once I get into the pattern. And it's so portable. I really liked how it was handheld. There's a little plastic needle that you can use to weave and tamp down the yarns. And yeah, I also like that it creates this nice discrete patch that now I can plug in. So I've soldered some pins to the ends of this yarn so I can actually plug it in to other electronic components. So my first patch that I did on the Zoom loom, if you haven't woven on a pin loom before, warping it was actually it was different. So you might have seen like little handheld tapestry looms, and most looms that you'll see, you'll warp in one direction, the vertical direction. But on a pin loom, you zigzag the yarns. I wish I could bring the loom, but someone else was using it. You wrap the yarns up and down first, but then you take it and you go left and right again. And this is a 2-layer. Well, this is one way of warping it. And then you actually go and make a 3rd layer in the up and down direction again. And then your actual weaving that binds it up into a fabric is back in the left and right direction, and you can make a plain weave that way. It's a really different workflow, which is interesting. I don't have that because I'm using it as a coaster, but I just grabbed some nice like neon rainbow red heart that we had, and it's a really fun little coaster thingy. So that was my first time on that loom. I just followed the directions. And my next one was this. This is actually a woven button patch because, as you can see, this part is puffy. That's double woven and it's stuffed. And when you press it, and when this is connected to a circuit, the two, you make these two faces of the double weave fabric connect. And that completes the circuit, and it detects as a button pressing, which is really what all a button is. A button is an open break in the circuit, and then when you press it, you close the circuit and electricity flows, and you give a signal to some processing system. So for these two samples that I'm showing, once I understood the warping process, I actually changed it up. So instead of, when I was warping, I didn't switch to the left and right. I just did a layer of up and down. So that I could just kind of weave normally on it like a tapestry loom. And that way I could also control what was in the warp. So when I was warping it, this gray yarn here is actually the same yarn that I used in my conductive texting gloves. It's a stainless steel yarn, and I followed the path of the ground warp yarn, which I believe is a wool. It's just a fuzzy wool yarn. And I laid the stainless on top of it in just this stripe. So that is a supplementary warp technique. Supplementary or supplemental? I don't know. I see both in use. So there's a stripe of conductive in the warp direction, and then this black patch that was woven in the weft direction. And I just started weaving, switched to black, but then the black was also held with more stainless, and it forms the other side of the switch. And then I took the tails and then wound them up. And this I had to kind of hack together. So this is a pin that you can crimp to a wire usually, but it was a little different. I crimped it down on the yarn. Just focus. There we go. Yeah, so I crimped it down onto the yarn. And, okay, this is getting into electronics, but the header, this pin is made of a different kind of metal than the stainless steel. And when you solder it, it just... Okay, I should look into how soldering works. I think it has to do something with the magnetic properties of the metal in solder. But basically, solder is what you use to bridge metal components together and make sure the electricity can flow. Stainless steel does not stick to solder, which is so weird. And so annoying because that's the nicest kind of conductive yarn that we have, but not being able to solder to it means that it's hard to connect to the rest of the circuit. So I had to hack it by crimping the pin on, making that physical connection, and then just gunking it up with the rest with solder until I couldn't pull the yarn out. As you can see, it's not a perfect process because I ended up pulling the pin out on this side. I'll keep working on it. But anyway, that's the woven button. I made a diagram for the project to hopefully better explain the structure. Please let me know how I can better explain this. I am interested in trying to like bridge the communication gap between the arts and like people in tech and people in STEM. And I feel like there could be so much collaboration if people on either side weren't kind of put off by this language barrier. And there are definitely also cultural factors in it. Like people are kind of intimidated by crafts, or there might be some biases against how it's women's work or something, and historically marginalized. And then tech is this like super privileged body of knowledge and science and math, and people are not everyone gets a good education in these subjects to begin with. So there's just a lot of stuff to unpack when communicating this stuff, and I would love to talk to you all more about it. So my next sample is some waffle weave on the zoom loom, on the pin loom, zoom loom, pin loom. So this I also stuck with warping it in the up and down direction on the frame, but then I actually doubled the warp so that I would get this denseness. It ended up being really hard to weave into at the end. Every time I wove a row, I had to really like shove it down so that I could keep packing the yarns in. But the trade-off is that now I have this really nice dense waffle weave, and I got 8 cells across on the pin loom. I had to do some weird things because you needed a multiple of 8 warp yarns, but with the way I was wrapping around the pins, I always got like 31 yarns, and that's just one off from a multiple of 8, and I just had to hack it. It was kind of annoying. But anyway, in the middle where it's a little darker, you can see, hopefully you can see that. That is more stainless steel yarn, and when it's woven into this soft, squishy structure, when you press on it, it will actually change the electrical properties of the fabric, and actually if you connect this, it becomes a pressure sensor. So I've also connected a pin here. I couldn't find one for this, and I haven't plugged this into anything yet, but I will hopefully take a video when I use this. But it's just a really fun little thing. I'm taking a very like projects focused class this semester, and I was getting sick of talking about my textiles work when I'm like, wait, I can make a patch and then bring it as a component into my class to use in my projects, so I don't have to just speculate about using my textiles in a circuit. We just use a lot of like normal resistor components, and but this is a nice portable way to put a little piece of my Smart Textiles work into my class project. So that's what I've been doing. I was actually sampling the button for a larger fabric that I'm working on, because the 2 pieces of conductive are in different directions, one in the warp, one in the weft. I could actually now make a grid of buttons, and I want to see if I can do that really like complex input on maybe a soft keyboard or something. Anyway, that's going to be a fun project. But the reason so let's get to the reason why I was doing all that sampling in the first place and not actual weaving. because at the end of last semester, we ran out of warp, usable warp on the TC2. So now we had to wind new warp and then tie it on to the old warp and add it in, basically. So there were a few new things that we were trying as a lab. So I made a warping paddle, which if you've worked with a rigid heddle loom, it's kind of like a chunk of that, and you can wind multiple ends at once. So I was winding 12 off of 12 cones at once, which is great because last time I was winding the warp, I had to wind them individually, and I had to wind 1,320 ends on the warping board, going 1,320 times back and forth. And now I could do 12 at a time and cut that time into 12ths and divide that time by 12. And it saved me so much time, especially because I have to do all of this extremely time-consuming work around my classes and stuff. So yeah, it's been really tough to balance weaving and other parts of my work. Some stuff cut off here. I don't know why. To do weaving as it's like the only part of their work they have to worry, or it's the main part of their work that they have to worry about. And I'm like, that sounds so nice to just be able to sit down and take a dedicated week to just rewarp your loom. But no, I have to spread this out over 2 months and talk to people and enlist people to help me out with it so we can get it done in 2 months around everyone's schedules. Ugh. But anyway, hopefully I'll be inserting some helpful pictures in here. Once we wound the warp, we wound a longer length than we did the first time. So with the first warp yarn, we had about 5 yards to work with. And as I get more comfortable with setting up the loom, I'm just trying out longer and longer warps. So this time I wound on 10 yards, and so when you wind that 10 yards on, then you have to wind it onto the back beam of the loom and load it in that way. So to keep it under, you want the beam to roll on all that yarn in a solid sheet of warp yarn. So that what really helps with that is keeping it under tension. So actually, we strung up a PVC pipe from the ceiling of the lab and used it as a warping ballet or warping trapeze. People call it either thing. And we actually scavenged some milk jugs and filled them with water to adjust the weight. And then we hung these milk jugs from each bundle to keep it under tension. And after that was done, then we had to tie all of the ends of the new warp to the old warp, and you just have to do all those knots one by one, and you just tie square knots. So I had to learn how to tie square knots under tension, which we have some very helpful books, which I'm really glad for. Printing out the page, use it as a reference. The loom is magnetic, so we can post these little references on the loom to remind ourselves of stuff like a refrigerator. So, by the way, those books are Peggy Osterkamp's 3-part series. And they are just this compendium of weaving techniques for people who want to set up your loom and really understand the system. So once we tied on all the knots and we had all these knots behind the heddles, and we had to ease it slowly through everything. The heddles, which control which yarns go up and down. The reed, which is the comb that beats it in to make an even fabric. And all of that was just a really fine comb. And you just eased all the knots in. Some came out, but most of them made it through. And the ones that unraveled, we could just retie. And now we're back online and weaving. So hopefully, I plan to get a lot of weaving done this semester. I hope to. And I have a couple of concepts to work out, so I'm excited for that. And that was a lot of weaving. So on my radar has something to do with that too. to inspire myself and get myself ready for more advanced weaving projects this semester, I've been listening to the Gist podcast by Sarah Resnick. She runs an online yarn and fiber shop focused on weaving, but she also runs a great podcast where she interviews artists from around the community and really gets their insights and the way they work or their story. She actually interviewed Catherine Amadei, who is the TC2 rep in North America. So she actually came to our lab and did a workshop. Catherine, not Sarah. I'd love to meet Sarah someday. And every guest that I listen to, it just offers such great insights. Like she was interviewing a woman who does organic cotton farming in California. And she had some great points on sustainability and how the materials that we put into our yarn make a huge difference in how sustainable the textile industry is. And yeah, just a very peaceful, thought-provoking, but calming podcast. And then for a more intense study, I am I'm spending some time with this book this weekend, and this is just going to be a reference around my lab, since my advisor got it. It's Mastering Weave Structures by Sharon Alderman, and it's a super comprehensive book of all these different kinds of weave structures. She sections it into plain weave and what you can do with plain weave, and I didn't even know you could do that much with plain weave. And then there's twills. Then she gets into more complex structures, but I feel like I'm just going to get hung up on the simple structures because I didn't know there was this much to them. Yeah, I should make this an independent study or something because this is basically a class for me. What's frustrating is that like my campus doesn't have a lot of textile stuff. I might have to, I'm in Boulder. CU doesn't have, the CU like art department doesn't have a lot of textiles. I'm looking at, maybe I could go up to Fort Collins, but that's like an hour and a half drive away. But that'd be really awesome because I know they have a bomb textiles department and I'd love to meet people there. If anyone out there watching is in Fort Collins and has any affiliations at CSU, hi. But yeah, that's on my radar, and I feel myself getting tired, so let's bang out life update. So this was already a month ago. I am so out of sorts. But at the beginning of February, I went to a 2-day welding workshop in Denver. And if you're interested in supporting a queer-run welding space that is focusing on educating queer people and all marginalized groups and making this safe space for people who haven't traditionally been welcome in workshop environments and metalwork to do it, you should check out Wicked Queer Welding on Instagram, and they're running workshops. They're getting more workshops up and running, very beginner friendly, and yeah, and also just super inspiring with their approach to teaching the craft. So I've taken a welding workshop before, but that was a very structured, when you came in, you knew exactly what project you were making. That project had been made hundreds of times by previous students, and it was really well run. Like, you learned, okay, these are the pieces you're going to be cutting, but they also you weren't just following orders. You also got, why are we cutting the pieces this way? And how does that contribute to this final structure that we've planned out? Which is a great skill to learn. This time, when I went to the welding workshop, even though it was beginner friendly, I still found it helpful to go back over this stuff. One, because I just needed more time with the welding tools and other machines in the shop to just feel more familiar with them. We were encouraged to just pick out pieces of scrap and then kind of work. Now we were in charge of our own designs, and we figured out, okay, what does this piece kind of want to be? I don't have my other piece here, but I have the second piece that I made here, which is a desk organizer. It's kind of full of shit, so I'm not going to tip it out too much. But yeah, this was like a metal pipe This was a different square pipe that I had. This was a random piece that had a square cutout that someone else did. But I thought it was cool and I could use it as a place to hang it. And this was, yeah, a little corner piece that I tipped on its end, or I tipped on the angle, and now it's a little trough for little doohickeys. That was just a really fun process, and it was an exercise in learning, like, okay, I have this vision, what do I need to actually get it there? So I learned how to use different tools than in my first welding experience. I learned how to use a plasma cutter, which just seriously just burns away the metal. It's metal as fuck. So yeah, it was really fun. And then that same weekend, since it was in Denver and up in Boulder, I don't have a car, so I took the bus down and I actually stayed with a friend. Stayed at a friend's place that night who was also in the workshop, and at her place we did some wool stuff. She is an awesome fiber artist and just like this whisperer of fleeces. So this was my first time getting to process and wash a fleece with her. I helped her out with it was a Rambouillet Columbia Cross fleece. So I have the bits that we washed here. There's still some VM in it, but it will come out when I spin it. I love this dark color. You have I think these lighter tips are from some sun bleaching, but that's fine. I still really love the color of this, and can't wait to spin it up. It's so soft. It's so fine. Rambouillet and Columbia are both, I believe, both fine wool breeds. So this is, and it's already just like really springy. So I'm not going to do too much more processing. I might card it out and then just spin it up. I might even just spin it from the lock once I pull them apart a bit. So yeah, we washed it in boiling water and dunked it a few times until the water came out clear, and then laid it out on a screen overnight to dry. And it was just it's so dry in Colorado that it dried overnight, and after we had dinner, and I was able to take it home in the morning. Or take it with me to the second day of the workshop, and then right from the workshop, she took me to the bus stop, and then I was able to take it home from there. So yeah, and then she also gave me a fleece that she wasn't going to use anytime soon. This will be my chance to wash something on my own. So I have an entire bag of this. It's a few pounds. I haven't weighed it exactly and logged it. I need to keep better records of my wool. But this is a Romney fleece, and I am also so excited to work with this. I believe this part might actually be already washed. It doesn't feel very greasy at all. Yeah, so she had washed parts of the fleece. She had even spun some of it. But then realized like she has so much fleece that she's not going to get around to it. So I get it now. And yeah, it smells so good. It's like crack. Wool people are weird. But yeah, as you can see, that was a month ago. I just really have not gotten it together to podcast or do much of anything. I feel like I've been all over the place and stretched pretty thin. And I wish I had more energy to engage with the community, especially as people reckon with these very hard questions of how to take down racism and white supremacy in the community. And I am so glad that this work is happening and that we're thinking about how to make the crafting communities, but also the world in general, a safer place for Black, Indigenous people of color. But I just need to take care of my own stuff first, and hopefully that means along the way I'll be able to help other people too. But yeah, I just have a lot going on. I'm just tired. But yeah, it's been fun, at least. It's been fulfilling. So I hope that I can keep, I will keep doing it in the coming weeks, and look out for a test knit from me. Yeah, so this went into wrap up. But yeah, I'm gonna keep going. I got this. I just need to vent sometimes. Which I feel like this episode was very venty. I'm gonna leave you with that. But yeah, look out for the test knit from me. Stay up to date with my Unfabricate project. Let me share, please. Like, if you're doing stuff that relates to this, please share. I don't want to be reinventing the wheel, but I'd love to start more conversation around sustainability in the craft, and just reusing materials, maybe getting a look into industry production. So yeah, have a good rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you.